welcome to the Healing You Show with Gloria Lybecker, our host, and I'm Vanessa Harris. And we are going to be talking about listening. How do we listen? It's a conversation that keeps coming up at the moment. I was, especially around COVID isolation and checking in on people and young children, and I'm hearing advice about things like you need to listen. You need to listen to your children. Just listen to your children or listen to these people, or check in on people. But my concern is that some people, most of us, don't actually know how to listen or how to listen really effectively.
Well, and if we think about why that is, when we look at our lives and we look at how we grew up and how we were engaged with, or how our parents or our teachers or our bosses listened to us, or our coworkers or our friends, for many of us, we were just there to listen and not actually engage. Or we were to listen in order to solve a problem and fix it. And so those are very predominant in most cultures, that they're only listening and they have an agenda, even if they don't know it.
So listening for the purpose to see whether you agree or disagree, or to solve, or
to judge.
Yes. We're doing all the time, but I think sometimes it's very subtle. And it's not, I think people think the word judgment as a really negative thing, or a really, terrible mean. It can be very subtle and not necessarily negative. It's just, but it gets in the way.
Well, it can, and we tend to be judging beings as human beings, but I would prefer to use the word discerning. I would like to empower my ability to discern things rather than judge them. Judgment does have a harsher connotation to it. And yet if we're going to develop our ability to truly listen, for me, what that means is I'm listening to what is that person's heart expressing, not what are the words coming out of their mouth. And if I'm wanting to have a heart connection with somebody, which is a lot different than I'm wanting to make sure they're doing the right thing or they're getting the right answer, because there's a lot of that, and that's where the judgment comes in. Or I think I have the right advice for you. I know what to do, or I know it better than anybody. And so there's all of this ego stuff that can get in the way as well.
So one of the big examples that's coming to my mind at the moment is I have a friend whose daughter is missing school. She's skipping classes, and then they're trying to have a conversation about what's going on here. But if I'm listening to someone and I'm thinking, why are you missing school? Tell me, and so I can work it out, get to the bottom of it, so that we can stop it and we can get you back at school. That is going to have a different energy to a genuine curiosity of what is going on for you, or tell me about your experience, or what is, yes. So even myself thinking about that, I'm thinking, what's going on there? Find out what's going on there, because it's like, then you can fix it. It's not really listening.
Sneak in. And usually it sneaks in because it's just what we've experienced in our own life. So of course that's going to be the way we show up, unless we can begin to have new models that we can learn from through our experiences with them. So when we notice, because every action we take, every word we say is actually a communication. So our behavior, what we do or we don't do, is a communication when we know how to listen to it. And so for a lot of us, nobody has taken the time to help us learn that. How do we learn how to read the cues of the body? The cues of the body, like, is the pulse going faster? You can see it here. You can also see it here. Sometimes you can actually see it in someone's wrist. What's their face look like? Is it frozen and is it immobile? Or is it really soft and engaging and alive? What about their speech, the cadence, their breath? All of those things, their body posture. Are they like this? Are they like that? I mean, what's their body posture?
Mm.
All of those things are communicating, but especially if you look just at the eyes, you can tell the emotion that's happening for somebody. Um, and it's really important to be able to discern that without being intrusive. So with the example you give of a teenager that's skipping out of classes and not communicating, well, I wouldn't find it to be very effective to just do a direct approach. And yet what I'd want to do is I'd want to find an opportunity to have an experience in relationship with the person to where I might begin to make an inquiry and check in and get consent to have the conversation because that's respectful, you know?
So when you say, so that's the first part of listening, I'm guessing, is actually getting consent to have the conversation. So what does that look like? What does that look like?
Well, it could look many different ways. And so one version of it might look like, so say you're my child that's been skipping out of school. I'd say, hey, Vanessa, I was wondering, I've been a little concerned about that you've been missing some of your classes. And I'm wondering if there's a time we might be able to have a chat about that. Well, are you open to that?
Not really. I don't want to talk about it.
All right. Well, so there'd be one version, and depending on how the child is going to also inform how you're going to approach them.
Yeah, because I was imagining the child that my friend's been discussing, and I was imagining myself the one time I skipped out of school, but actually that's where I was conflicted because I would really quite happily talk about that because it was just so fascinating and I was so clear and direct in why I was doing it. And I was just so happy to be doing it.
Another thing that would be happening would be to just say, hey, I'm just wondering if I can check in with you. How's it going? Can we hang out for a bit? And then see, is there an opening to that? Can I make an invitation from the energy that I'd love to share with you? If I'm carrying an anger or a fear or a mistrust, it's going to read all over my body language. And even if the child's not consciously aware of it, their body will pick up on it and it'll close the door for more communication. So sometimes if my son is bothered by something, I might just, come to his door and say, hey, can I come in? First, I'm going to get consent to go in his space. May I come in? Sure. I'm like, okay. It's okay if I hang out with you for a while and just, watch what you're doing? Because usually he's playing a game or something. So I want to develop a relationship and a rapport with them that they feel comfortable with me being there, or do they always automatically think, oh, here comes mom, great. What kind of a relationship have I developed with my child? I know as a high school student, I had things that were very traumatic that happened to me, and that's when I started skipping school. So there were things that happened in my life, and I was skipping school in order to get attention for somebody to notice something was wrong, but nobody asked me about it. So then I just experienced like I just really didn't matter. Until finally a teacher noticed, saw me skipping out of school, so he got upset, and he was just going to flunk me. Well, then my mom showed up in order to go to bat for me and had a conversation between the teacher and myself, and I could do the work, I just wasn't. And when my mom showed up and we had a conversation, well, then I got an A, and the teacher handed me the paper and says, I guess you can do it. Well, then I would never get an A again because it was an adverse kind of thing to do. Mm-hmm. And so, but kids, they have so many different layers of their experience that many adults aren't, I don't know, it's kind of like, did they forget what it was like to be a kid?
Yes, I think a lot of them do. There's a term they use, or is it dogs never remember when they were puppies? But and then even when they do, I don't think people in my generation at least, and definitely not from the generations above me, were ever taught how to listen, like, because they didn't have the experience of
Yeah.
many people. I mean, I did have the exposure and experience of some people listening to me, so I got a taste of what it felt like to be
Well,
heard.
and as I remember, what you said about that was they would reflect what they heard you say. So that's a skill set that people could begin to practice, is being able to actually catch what they're hearing and then reflect it back using their own words. And if you're speaking with a younger child, using their own words is more effective, because children that are younger tend to be pretty black and white, and they don't think you heard them if you don't use the words they use.
Uh-huh. Okay. So even that in itself. So listening back to a child, a small child, repeating back exactly what they're saying is actually effective.
Oh, it's very for them to feel felt or understood. One of my grandsons, when they were just like barely talking, and one of them, they're twins, one was extremely close to his dad, and he was very distressed that his dad wasn't the one putting him down for his nap. And as I'm rocking him in my arms, he's crying and saying, "I really am mad at my dad." And I would just reflect back, "You're really mad at your dad." "Yes." And so I would just continue to reflect back what he said, "You really," and then I would start to soften it, like, "You really like dad to rock you to sleep?" "Yes." And I would start to kind of peel away, where was it this child was going? And as soon as I named all of those things and acknowledged that, he could fall asleep peacefully. But just telling him to, "Oh, hush, 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 Grandma's here," he wouldn't even feel understood. But to really hear him.
So when what he's expressing is, "I'm really mad at my dad," which is what he thinks he's feeling. I remember feeling the same feelings when I was very, very young. If I felt any sense of rejection from my mum, then I would just go, "I don't like you," like just this seething, blood boiling feeling. And it was really rejection and pain and hurt
Really,
underneath.
I love you and I miss you and I want you to be with me.
I'm not going to feel that right now because you're not there and available. So I'm just going to be really cranky and not like you instead. But I didn't know that at the time. I didn't recognize that.
You didn't have an adult in your life that could reflect back so that you could actually get to the under layers of what's actually alive within you.
So listening back, like I was saying, and reflecting that back, how do you do that for an adult or a teenager? Because if you reflect back exactly the same words.
Well, you wouldn't need to do that so much with someone that's older. It would be like, well, can I, I want to get consent first. So if I'm doing this with somebody that wants to work with me, then I would want to map out, well, when we're working, I really want to be able to catch what I'm hearing you say. So I would want to pause and be able to reflect back, because it's important that I really understand. Would that be all right with you? Are you okay with that? So I'm going to kind of map out what it's going to look like. And if it's more casual and I'm just wanting to have a conversation, if they're really lit up and they're talking really fast and they're going really a million miles an hour, and I'm going to go, hold down, slow down a minute. This is really important to me. I want to hear it. Or this is fascinating. Can I tell you, can I say what I think I heard so far? Because I don't want to miss anything. And then I might reflect what I'm hearing.
So what about culturally? Because that to me, my way of that I have learned to listen, and learning to listen was a skill that I actually had to develop, because years ago I recognized that I was talking and I was listening, but I was listening to that person, what they said, and then I was hearing an opinion or like a commentary in my own mind about what they were saying, agreeing, disagreeing, going, wow, yeah, I get that. Or even if it was a positive resonance, I was still listening to myself give an opinion of what they were saying, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah. And that's quite common, especially when we're developing our skills, because we always have an inner dialogue. We all have an inner voice. And sometimes there's people that don't know that everyone has this voice. They just think they're the only one all their life. And then they discover this, like, really? Everybody has that? It's like, yes, it's true. It's actually called our default mode network. And depending on what our life experience has been, how we've experienced relationships in the environments that we've been in, it can tend to be a very critical voice that's judging everything, especially us. And yet we can develop, with being held empathetically, we can develop a kind and compassionate, a warm voice and a warm eye gaze that we can have internalized as well as with others. So when I'm listening to somebody, I want to really have myself get out of the way. I want to be open and really focused on what's important to them and making sure I'm catching that. I don't need to agree with them to do this. It's not about agreeing with them. It's not about anybody being right or wrong. It's about me truly understanding their heart. And I can tell that I've understood their heart by how their body responds to my response.
So much of what you're saying about listening is, and this explains why I have so many miscommunications with certain people, is that visual and that energetic connection and that face-to-face, which we're missing a lot of at the moment, especially with being in isolation.
Like this, when we're even just with video, I work with most all of my clients in this way right now. And I have conversations with people this way because right now I'm in Alaska. So that's not a barrier. And even if we're just talking on the phone, we can hear it in the prosody of the voice.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it is developing the skill set to know what we're listening for.
And so what about, so for myself, I always like to reflect back little pieces, or even with just a or oh, so did this happen? So, or if I need to clarify something to make sure that I'm tracking properly, if someone's speaking a lot, I'll say, so I'm not giving my opinion, I might just go, oh, so did that happen, or did this, or did they say that, or hang on, who took this, or whatever. So I'm just clarifying something as I'm trying to get the picture in my head. But I have some friends, one in particular, who really does not like being interrupted at all. Like, they like to talk for long periods of time, and they go round and round and round and round and round and round and round. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness. And then I actually was doing some reading, and I think it's cultural, because the country that they are from, when I was reading about things about this country, it was talking about their style of communication and not interrupting them. But for me, it's like, how do I let that person know I'm listening?
Well, and so then it's important to know who's the audience, who are you speaking to, or who are you listening to? Because it's not going to be the same for everybody. And it's important to honor that and to respect that. But what I like to do is I like to check in at the beginning. So that would be something that if you have a friend like that, they would say, I would appreciate that you don't interrupt me. I just want to speak. Then you might actually ask, well, how will you know that I'm listening? How would you like me to respond? Because it's really not about you. It's about, are you actually being a reflector for them? Are you being relational with them in a way that is going to honor who they are? Or do they have to show up the way you want them to in order for you to be in a relationship? Because that's true for some people. They don't want to spend the time of day with you if you're not going to do what they want you to do. But that's not really a reciprocal relationship. So it's important to have consent both directions. Because if I'm just going to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, then I'm not actually engaging in a conversation. I'm broadcasting. I am here. And sometimes when I'm doing teaching, I'll move into a broadcast mode in order to share information. But then my style of teaching is to slow down and then to ask what's standing out to you. Do you have any questions? That kind of thing. So then there's this reciprocation.
I like that term, broadcasting. That really resonates with me. I think there's a lot of broadcasters in my environment. My son broadcasts sometimes when he's talking about his video games. And if anyone comes and interrupts, he's just like, no, I'm talking. And my friend, sometimes it feels like it's a broadcast. Except that what they're saying is really heartfelt and meaningful to them. But sometimes I find myself wondering if I missed the point. And my curiosity is there.
Yeah, so one of the things, if somebody is broadcasting, but I'm going to slow down. I really want to be listening and visually taking in their body language so that I can start to capture what's important to them. What are the few things that are most important? And then when they take a breath, I might say, so is it this? And I want to ask questions. I want to ask whether so is this what's really important to you? Or, so this is what really stood out to you? Or, so you really value whatever it is they've been talking about. But I want to come down to the needs or the values that underlie what the content is. Just sit through it. When I reflect, I don't want to do every single word. That would just be monotonous. It's
so not reflecting back everything. So filtering it down to what is their general feeling and what is their general need underneath that, and
what is their deepest need, or what is what keeps coming back around in what they're saying. And when I talk with teenagers or young adults or any age person, what they're talking about is giving you clues to what they value or what's important to them. And really paying attention and honoring that, or asking about that. Or is there more you'd like me to hear about that?
As you're describing that, I'm just feeling like I'm getting this sense of the worst thing that you could do if you really want to listen and hear your child or your teenager especially, is to give any opinion or advice, because
without not, no.
Everything you're saying is check in with them, ask questions, clarify, say, have I got this, have I got that? Nowhere in that did I hear you say, well, you need to look at it this way, or what about this, or well, you can't be thinking like that, or
what you can do is depending on how it's going in the relationship, you can ask, I wonder if you're open to hearing my thoughts on this.
Because that's a really valid point. Would you be open to hear my thoughts on this? Because I know my friend is really distressed by her child missing.
I'm wondering if you've wondered if you've considered any other options. Or do you have anyone that you're sharing this information with that you trust? It's like you got to build the trust. Just because you are the parent or the teacher or the whatever you are, the guardian, it doesn't mean they trust you unless you have fostered that trust, for it to be a reciprocal trust.
And what I was just hearing you saying there was, at the beginning you said something about how, I wonder if I can share with you how I'm feeling about this or what I'm thinking.
Are you open to hearing?
I'm open to hearing, that was it. Because often when it's something that, like this, it's quite charged on both sides. Yes, you want to hear what's going on for that child, but there's also an element of wanting to be heard yourself.
Well, so with parents, I would encourage them to have another adult that they can bounce it off of first, because a lot of times we're going to have a knee-jerk reaction, an emotional reaction to what our child may be saying. And if we can just hold the space to allow them to be heard and understood for what it's like for them, and then maybe come back at a later time to have the second part of the conversation. Because otherwise it feels like, oh, you just wanted me to bare my guts so then you could just, crucify me or just make me wrong, or, it's like they need their experience to be honored. They need to matter. They need to experience care. And if you
so then I'm going to use that person really carefully too. The person that you're bouncing things off as the adult, the adult bouncing things off so that they can support their child. You need to choose that person
right there.
carefully.
That's self-care for the adult. The adult needs to have a place where they can be understood what it's like for them to be a parent of that child. So that they can be clear and available to their child, that their own baggage doesn't come up and dump on their child. Because I would
in my experience, being the adult, needing the other adult to bounce off, finding an adult to bounce off that is actually going to contribute to my self-care and not tear the problem apart is really difficult. Because they've often got their values and opinions about the way that child's acting or what they should do and how you should deal with it. And
so that just takes the self-care one. That takes you
So
back
again,
to square one, is
mhm.
really being aware of who you're talking to and what is the intention underneath why you're having the conversation. So you just don't want to go talk to just anybody about things that are really matters of the heart for you. You want to make sure that you are having a conversation with somebody that has the skill sets that you need. If you want somebody to give you empathy, they need to understand what that is. And even I know when I looked for therapists or I looked for counselors or I looked for coaches or somebody that could support me, well, I would interview them and I would ask them those kinds of questions. And I would want them to be able to have a conversation with me about it so I could have that experience. And the experience is what's going to inform me whether there is that neuroception of safety so that I can trust that my experience is going to be held with care. And
Can you
that's going to
explain
support me to
neuroception?
have that with my child then later.
Can
What
you
was your
explain
question?
neuroception of safety?
Yeah, Stephen Porges um, is he's a neuroscientist or a researcher that coined that phrase. And the neuro is like at a cellular level, a neural pathway. It's the perception of our cells that can tell whether our body is safe in space or not. And it's
Mhm.
beneath conscious awareness, but it's a felt sense. And when we can feel that, I mean, there's certain people where you meet them, it's just like, oh, you can just relax, you know?
Mhm.
And then when you meet other people, it's like you're just tense. So listen
Mhm.
to what your body says. There's a really good reason your body responds the way it does. But when you can have a conversation with somebody, do you notice that it's getting tighter and tighter? Or do you feel like, oh, finally I'm feeling understood, I'm being heard? And so those are the things I would look for. But this could be a much, much deeper conversation. There's other points that maybe we can have conversations about that and do a little modeling for people around some of the skill sets that it's possible to develop.
I think that would be really useful because I hear a lot of people talking about how do I speak or how do I say that or how do I listen or how do I communicate. Um, and teenagers always seem, maybe that's just my stage in life because my children are teenagers, but they seem to be, that's where the greatest chasm is often, that and spouses, where people have miscommunication. I can't get through or they're not hearing me or I might be able to listen to them. And when I hear things, I think, I want to get back in that conversation that they're repeating and I want to hear it from a different perspective. Um, so we could look around. One of the things I find difficult for myself is listening, really, really tuning into the other person, but then maintaining a boundary for myself at the same time, like balancing. How do I listen and tune into you and be completely curious and open about you, but also get my needs met and have my boundaries for me that I find it's I can swing one way or the other, and I sitting in that middle ground and balancing it is difficult. Um, so yeah, that might be something else that we can explore and do some modelling
Yeah, that'd be a rich
and
conversation.
experience. I know that when I've experienced or seen and heard you listening to other people, it's very powerful. So even when it's not me receiving the empathy or the listening or the understanding, hearing you or someone else as a witness listening to those people, it's like I'm experiencing it myself as well, and I'm learning how to listen.
The beauty of being in a circle is that we all have at least 25 watts of energy that's flowing, electricity flowing through our system. So when we have a small group that's together, we have all of those watts that are together, well, they all resonate together. And regardless of who is the giver and the receiver of the process of empathy, it's going to resonate in the field with everybody. And everybody gets to absorb those frequencies of energy and information flow. And so everybody benefits from it. And most often the person that's being held for whatever their experience is has a really big shift, but as human beings, we all share the same universal needs and values. We might phrase them differently, but it's still the same energy. And so we all benefit from the experience of being in community with one another. And it can be a positive experience, or it can be not so life-serving, depending on what the energy is that we're sharing.
I've been in the not so life-serving circles and I've been in the really positive ones, so that's very true. I like the ones where I have a shared reality and a genuine resonance. So yeah, I definitely relate to that. I think that's my experience when I hear people gossiping in a really unhealthy way, and they're not really listening to each other. It's just there's one person broadcasting about someone else's stuff, and
so there's some open-ended questions that you could begin asking that type of person when you hear that. And so that'd be a lovely conversation. Maybe we'll do this the next time. How do you have a conversation with somebody when it feels really uncomfortable?
Jot that one down.
Oh, there you go.
Sounds great. All right. Well, I look forward to exploring some more shows where we actually look at modeling some of those specific words and behaviors for listening, and in exploring having conversations with people when you're really uncomfortable.
Yeah. And if our listeners or our viewers are interested in getting to participate in a small group or receive support for their unique situation, I invite them to reach out to me at healingyoursanctuary.com. I'd love to have a conversation with them. Thank you.
Thanks.